Monday night. You got it. We have a double header. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth on the Sports Exchange. Great show lined up. Why do I say that? Because it is Kentucky Derby week. My goodness. And I got a guy that knows a little bit about horse racing. But before I go ahead, everybody know this show is going to be based on a couple things tonight. We're going to be talking about the Kentucky Derby and some of the recent upsets that occurred in the NHL and the NBA playoffs. With that said, let me go out there and introduce the crew. Smoking Jeremy B. Welcome back to the big show, Mr. Jeremy.
Well, glad to be here as always.
And GE, that stands for General Electric. We bring good things to life. And we also have George Eichhorn, it also stands for.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you brought back that memory for me. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, well, it's been a memory for longer than we probably were alive. And last but not least, Mr. Betting Expert John Ryan, Sports Numero 1. Welcome back, John.
Glad to be back here and join you guys for a good, fun 45 minutes or so. And we'll hopefully give some good betting intelligence to everybody again.
Yeah, pretty basic show tonight. Will be other shows that are not basic, and there'll be other ones that are really basic. So, and this is going to fall into one of those. Hey, Felicity James, keep it up, guys. Keep on coming on, Felicity. God bless you. All right, with that said, okay, we'll talk about Kentucky Derby week. And now, John, like I told you on the phone, you don't have to give me all the different crazy projections right away. You don't have to do that. We're going to keep it simple, stupid on this particular show tonight and let everybody know that, this is a show that we're obviously developing here with John as we get closer to football season. But there are a lot of big events that obviously that are going to occur before the NFL. So eventually we'll talk about the USFL, but it won't be tonight. So I just want to make sure that I set things up there very nicely for everybody. And we'll let everybody know that while you're here on Facebook Live, if you want to go ahead and chime into the chat room, feel free to do so. And there's a pretty good chance I'll bring you on the broadcast at a future date. So for those that are active, get a chance to go out there and shoot the breeze with all of us. And no, I don't mean Drew Brees, but shoot the breeze with us. As you can hardly tell, I had a little bit of caffeine today. But the audio version of the Sports Exchange can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. So if you want to listen to it, that is the way to do it. Please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. Okay, we're striving for 1,000 subscribers. Please also comment, like, and share the broadcast. Okay, want to be a guest? No problem. Like I said, send your topic ideas to South Florida Tribune at gmail.com, or you can also do it on my Twitter page at Tribune South. If you want to advertise, call 954-304-4941. We are live here on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. All right, first topic of the day is what the show was titled, the Kentucky Derby. Let's talk about, when we talk about, John, I'm going to lead it off with you, obviously, the entire broadcast, okay? We'll talk about the prediction of these Triple Crown races. I know there's a couple of prep races. I had an opportunity to see one many years ago in South Florida called the Florida Derby. I also know they have the Arkansas Derby, and there might be other ones, I don't know, but these are the two that I'm most familiar with. So, John, give us an overview how you go ahead and predict these Triple Crown races with a lot of the variables. I know that size of the track and the surface play a bit of a role in it too. John, take over from there.
Yeah, it certainly does. It really is important, the surface of the track, the conditions of the weather. But the one thing that draws me even more interest and more research effort is the Kentucky Derby, because it has 20 to 24 horses every year. As we know, as the Triple Crown evolves, a lot of horses aren't able to run 2 weeks later at the next race. And a lot of times we only have 6 horses or so at the Belmont. What also it does, which I'll provide later on this week, is the Superfecta, which I was fortunate enough to finally hit one last year. Okay. And the Derby provides you with the biggest potential payout on these Superfectas. Okay. We won't get into the details of what a Superfecta is. It's really, imagine a pyramid with all the horses top to bottom and their number that, is their what am I trying to say here? The post number that they are in, and you just create a pyramid with those numbers. So if those numbers actually come in the exact finish, that's when you cash the ticket. So it sounds like it'd be pretty easy, but you can create a 50-cent ticket that ends up being, $250 bet. So you have to be really careful when you do these things that you don't get too out of control and too crazy with them, because they are very, very hard to hit.
Okay.
But they're a heck of a lot of fun to do, nevertheless, because of the size of the field. So the one thing I noticed, and I think I wanted to confirm with you guys too, because my research just began this afternoon.
Okay.
It looks like Bradford doesn't have a horse involved with the Kentucky Derby. And do you guys find that to be true too?
Yes.
Yeah. Wasn't he the guy that was suspended anyways?
Mm-hmm. That's the owner that was suspended for the suspected doping, right?
Right. Yeah, that's what I thought so too, John. So yeah, if he
Right,
doesn't
but they
have
had they had indicated that there was the possibility of some horses that possibly had trained with him last year, say, get moved to a different training facility under a different owner and a different.
They probably
jockey.
do not want his name on those horses, is what it is.
That's quite true, and rightfully so. I mean, no question about it. But he is nevertheless the most polarizing and most recognizable face at a major event like this, just because of the appearance. But anyway, the event here, and one other thing I wanted to mention too, a lot of times, new bettors are taught that you stay away from the horse that drew the post on the rail. Now, what the Kentucky Derby has done at Churchill Downs is they used to have two separate, stalls for the horses that they would bring out, and there'd be 12 in the one, 12 in the other. The horses would go, and then two tractors would actually pull them out of the way so that when the horses came around, they wouldn't be there. Now they've connected them, and they've made it a much more favorable situation at the pole against the rail, where a horse is less likely to get squeezed into the rail and have to slow down. So, in this race, you have all different types of horses and horse racing styles. You got the speedsters that will be out there in front, and then you have the other ones that are closers, which won't even be on the TV screen, possibly to the right of the screen as the leaders are going down the back stretch, and then all of a sudden the announcers are announcing their names, and you're wondering where the heck did they come from?
Right.
But that's where we go with the research, and I know you guys do a lot of it too. You want to identify with the conditions, even the direction of the wind can take a bearing on whether you want to pick a closer in the Kentucky Derby. The Belmont, as we know, is the longest one. That's the third and final one. That's grueling, especially after two races like this, with this and the Preakness. And this one is the right length, in my opinion. That's why it's the most famous. It's the most fun. And I think another thing, guys, that people may not realize is that the qualifying for this race essentially began last September. And there's all these qualifying races that these horses can go through. And some of them, like the Arkansas Derby, which was just recently held, if you win that, you're in. So you don't really have to do anything that early. But, if you think your horse is going to win the Arkansas Derby, then you'll have enough points earned to get in with just that one race.
Well, what about the Florida Derby? Okay, I've attended, John, a few of those. How much of a important race is the Florida Derby?
Well, I think it's incredibly important because, again, you're accumulating points. And if your horse is one of those that may not be a contender at the Florida Derby, and you might need another race or two, you want to take your horse to the most favorable track that you think it's going to run the best on. And that is a very big qualifying race, to your point.
Right.
And, horses that have done well there translate pretty well to Kentucky.
Okay.
So, that's a great point. And any of these races, you can immediately start seeing which horses are going to be the leaders coming into the Kentucky Derby that have qualified, such as, Tapit Trice, Todd Pletcher owner, Luis Saiz is the jockey on that one. He's currently 6-1 on the opening, 5-1 now. So there's already money coming in on a favorite, and that always gets my attention. Mm-hmm. It's very tempting. It's like March Madness in a way that you want to take that long shot and hope that it comes through so that you can really feel like you're smart, like, oh, wow, I just won the Derby with a 20-1, medium shot, so to speak. And That doesn't happen too often. However, it has happened more often than previous history in these last couple of years. Another horse I am looking at for sure is Skinner. Now, this is a horse that is pretty somewhat unusual to be at 15 to 1. Money is not coming on him, so that actually makes me more interested in him because it's contrarian. Currently at 20 to 1, I think that's worth a pizza money, but certainly going to be in those superfectas and other larger type bets that we're going to be doing. Practical Move. Last race was the Santa Anita Derby, April 8th. Won by a nose. Point is, won. The owner is Pierre and Leslie Amistoy and Roger Beasley. The horse is very, very good. Very good reviews, good Derby scores in the races that it has run. And I think this is a horse that you definitely want to have on the radar. It's 10 to 1 right now. And I think that's a reasonable price for a horse of this talent. And then, of course, you have the long shots, which I think in this Derby, guys, I think you just kind of leave alone. Maybe in one of your superfectas, you add it as a just in case at 50 to 1. You have Jace's Road, Sun Thunders 50 to 1. However, the one big move this week that I've seen is that Jace's Road is opened at 50 to 1. It's currently 15 to 1. So I need to look into that and see, what has caused that. Maybe it was a poor price on the opening for this horse and people took advantage of it. But the fact that it's moved that much gets our attention because you immediately think like, why? Well, why did it move that much that quick?
That's a familiar name. Is that one that showed a couple of times at some of the lesser qualifying races?
Let's see here. The horse evaluation here in the notes is that it prefers shorter tracks, difficult to endorse off of tiring third at FG. David Aragona wasn't thrilled with the Louisiana Derby effort, sat on top of a soft pace and failed to finish. So this horse is more of those strong closing type of horses, and you would want to see a slow pace in the beginning. And then a horse like this, just like steadily just chop down each one that he passes and ultimately win the race. So that's one I think we need to really dive into and see why it has moved that much. And like I said, I'll provide all this in updates on the Twitter.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, John, the whole purpose tonight was to kind of get everybody to whet their appetite that during this year, this is when horse racing is on its biggest stage when you talk about the Triple Crown. By all means, as I said, when we brought you on tonight, I just want to let everybody know that's out there watching, listening to us on the various platforms that, again, a lot of things change from Monday until the end of the week. I know you never know if a horse could get accidentally injured, pulled. So, again, it's just basic information tonight. And you know what, John? Why don't you let everybody know early in the broadcast, okay, how they can find your information early, and we'll probably refer back to it in case they want to update for you. I think Twitter is your primary source of social media anyways, right, John?
Yeah, at John Ryan Sports and the number 1, as you see on the screen. And also, just, humbly said, I just was awarded the super subscriber from Twitter, which means that you can get exclusive content for just $9.95 a month, which, is an IPA. So it's not much, but all the details and the premium stuff that I release is going to be in there. And, the Kentucky Derby, though, is going to be published free of charge, especially for those that are listening here and are interested to know what I'm going to do. So no problem there at all. But I think it's an opportunity there to use the Twitter platform to really expand and leverage the data that I have in my massive databases and provide whatever I can with the time I have and, give people a lot of value, hopefully.
Right. So the main thing is like I said, and I want to move on to our next topic here. Okay. So Will Vogel has an interesting point. I'm not sure how to digest it. So why don't you go ahead? Saw that one Rebel Stakes this year. So why don't you elaborate on that? I'm not sure about this.
Elaborate about what?
Saw that one Rebel Stakes this year. Are you familiar with Rebel Stakes?
Yeah, and I actually don't have the info on that to mention anything, but feel free to bring it up and I'll chime in.
Yeah, that's fine. But meanwhile, the main thing, folks, is just go to John Ryan's Twitter page, and he'll be able to give you all the ins and outs about the Kentucky Derby as the week progresses. All right, thanks, Will. And why don't you just connect with John on Twitter to get the exact information. Final topic of the night, guys. George, is there anything you want to ask about?
Well,
Kentucky Derby?
I think a lot of us probably didn't know this, but this is the 50th anniversary, John, of the Great Secretariat, 1973. 50 years have gone by, and I'm sure the network is going to do a lot of features on it next Saturday. What do you remember about Secretariat, John, or any of our show panelists? I'd be curious.
I
just
was
remember
3.
What a great thing that was. What a great thing for the sports in America when that beautiful horse won the Triple Crown.
Yeah, well, Smoking Jeremy took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say I was only like 4 years old back then, but I was young enough not to really recognize what was going on. 10 years old. More interested in probably going outside and playing, baseball and that kind of thing. But what you remember is the domination. I think it was 23 lengths at the Belmont.
The Belmont, yeah.
Which, if memory serves correct with the history of it, nobody really gave that horse a chance to win it because it was too long for him. He wasn't going to have the stamina. He wasn't going to be able to hold on to the pace, and wasn't going to work out. But the horse proved otherwise. And, I reminded myself too of why I love these horse races, because I just started talking about Secretariat as if he's a human being. And I think that's where the emotion of these races is so tremendous, because they almost take on a life of their own.
Yeah. And
the horses, like, even when they come out of the paddock and they have their, what I call, on race day, I call it, hey, look at the friend he has, and it is so cool. It's almost like they're talking to each other, like, hey, man, you got this. You've been training really hard. And that horse is calming that, thoroughbred down almost like pre-game. Almost like, somebody walking up to Patrick Mahomes in the locker room and saying, we got this. And it's fascinating to me with the horses, because that they know what's going on. This is not something that they don't realize what's going on. They know why they're there, and they know that they should be running and not see anybody or another horse in front of them. But with Secretariat, that whole story, if you've never seen the movie, especially, watch the movie. For those that are watching that are only 20 years old or 25 years old, you'll love it. You'll absolutely love it. And you might even shed a tear when you see how special that horse was, and how, kind of like the Arnold Palmer of horse racing. Without Arnold Palmer, we probably don't have the PGA where it is today. I think the same can be said with Secretariat.
Great analogy.
Yeah, that is a great analogy. I got to tell you, my all-time horse racing movie was Seabiscuit, so go figure. So. All right, well, on to the next subject, okay, and the last one. We've seen a recent upset in the opening rounds of the NHL and NBA playoffs. We talked about Milwaukee losing to Miami, and, of course, now we saw two interesting ones. The Florida Panthers ousting the Boston Bruins, two presidents, and, of course, Seattle Kraken being the first team ever to go ahead, expansion team, to oust the Colorado Avalanche. So, John, this is mainly for you, and then I'll let Jeremy and George talk about it. Did you ever see these monumental upsets coming?
Well, I'll be totally honest and very humble. I had the Florida Panthers 3 of the 4 games that they won.
Did you?
They were the only 3 bets that came up on the models. Coming into the series, I think I'll draw on the analogy to the Chicago Bulls in the year that they broke the all-time scoring record or a win percentage record. And I think what happens in these situations is Boston and that team got out to such a quick start, and everybody right then and there, almost like the media did with Roger Maris. You think you can break the record? Do you think you can break the record?
Right.
Every single day, these guys had to go through that whatever it is, rigmarole, the pressure, and it really wears on a team. And I think that is what we saw with Boston. Florida had beaten Boston 5 times of the losses that they had this season, which was by far the best. And, oddly enough, the second team they lost the most to, actually, there's only 2 teams that Boston lost to more than once. Florida with the 5 and now 6, and the Ottawa Senators.
Really?
How can that be? You just think, well, that would be an automatic win, but it's not. So coming into these playoffs, knowing that they had broken the record, and it wasn't like I wanted them to win the Stanley Cup. Who wouldn't? You know, after a season like that, you want to see them finish it. But when I get into the betting part of it, I'm looking at numbers.
Okay.
I'm not looking at mascots. I'm not looking at what they did record-breaking wise during the regular season. I'm looking for an edge.
Mhm.
And I think that was a big edge coming in. And then when the models set up the way they did, you know, I'll be honest with you. Last night I was watching in the overtime, and I almost didn't want to win the bet because I hated what I was going to see
Yeah, right.
with the Boston Bruin fans and the letdown and seeing the goalie give up that series-ending goal. I mean, it's so final. And you know, I really mean that. I really felt like terribly bad, like for the city of Boston and their fans, that they had this unbelievable season and then had to end like this.
Yeah.
So that was quite the experience, to be honest. But each one of those dogs was plus 220. I mixed them up sometimes with a puck line, which is plus 1.5 for those that don't know.
Right.
And it worked out. You know, Florida just really showed grit, especially the way Boston came out in that third period.
Right.
We thought it was going to be Golden State and Sacramento in the NBA the night before. 2 goals in 4 minutes and 10 seconds. And, you know, you thought that Florida didn't have a chance. And then
Right.
in the whole series, every time that happened, Florida would answer. And they did again last night. And, you know, you got to give the credit to them for winning it.
Well, the irony is you had a matchup featuring the last 2 President's Cup trophy winners.
The
And
Jinx.
Florida left. Yeah, it's a President's Trophy curse.
Will
Is that what
Vogel
they call it?
stole. Will Vogel stole my thunder. Yes, I was
Yeah.
going to say in the last 20 years, there's only been 4 President Cup winners that have won the Stanley Cup. One of them being the Detroit Red Wings, no less.
Right. Yeah. Well, again, this is a battle of the last 2 President's Trophy winners. Okay. And as it turns out, the team that had 40 some odd less points ended up winning, being a heavy underdog. So, you know, it's surreal. And let's not lose sight of the fact that Seattle Kraken, a second-year team, defeated Colorado. So I don't know, what is a bigger upset, John? And I'll turn over to Jeremy and George. Would you say that the Panthers beating Boston is a bigger upset, or would you say Seattle over Colorado is a bigger upset?
That's a tough question. It's a great question, but a tough one to answer. I think
Oh, you think I make these questions easy? Come on, Brian.
well, you know, it's you have 2 monumental upsets in the same day, both
right.
game
That's
sevens, and that's rare.
Yeah.
Separated
it's so
by 3.5
rare that-
hours.
Right.
Yeah, and you know, after watching Florida pull off the dramatic upset, you think, well, Colorado ought to take care of this. And I didn't have anything on that game, but you know, now the danger is as a bettor, and I think the lesson to be learned is that you just saw 2 road teams win game 7. Very rare. It makes you as a beginning bettor want to take the Rain or the New Jersey Devils tonight because they're playing at home, and there's no way in God's green earth 3 road teams are going to win 3 consecutive game 7s. Well, I'm here to tell you, you know, it can happen, and I don't know what the score of that game is right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens 3 times in a row. So we can't really
have 3 times in a row, though.
Games like
Because
that.
it happened in basketball last night. The road team won in the Golden State Warriors. So 3 road teams won in Game 7 situations in the same day.
Well, here's Will Vogel's opinion. He thinks it's Seattle because it's a expansion team. That's a good point. Well, I mean, that's why I brought it up. This second-year team, you know, Dave Haxtell. What few people don't understand, though, that Dave Haxtell was a great coach in college, okay? Struggled with the Philadelphia Flyers, but this guy's a heck of a coach. He really is. And obviously, he takes on an expansion team the second year. They're excellent. So, you know, again, well, you know, with all due respect, you're probably mentioning the obvious choice, which is a good choice, with Seattle being a second-year team. And we all know that the Vegas Golden Knights ended up making it to the Stanley Cup Finals the first years, but they're setting the bar on expansion teams higher than they did, George, back in the day when you and I were dealing with the teams like the Atlanta Flames, New York Islanders, Washington Capitals, and
the early Florida Panthers.
They're getting
well, the early Florida Panthers got to their only Stanley Cup final. But
right.
yeah, I mean, right. No, I remember that all the way, Smoking Jay. But the
I
reality
just
is,
wanted to bring that up too.
well, no, it's okay. It's fair. I mean, yeah, the Kansas City Scouts came in when the Washington Capitals did. So, we have a vast hockey knowledge background on here that most people realize. So I'm going to turn over to George Eichhorn. Okay. What are your thoughts about what transpired? And we talk about the Milwaukee Bucks losing to Miami Heat, but I don't view that as, John, as big of an upset because the Miami Heat look like a mash unit all year. And anytime you have a guy like Jimmy Butler on there, that's a different situation because this guy can turn it on and carry a team on his back. So we're going to keep the focus on the NHL, albeit Milwaukee Bucks fans don't like us, and Mike Budenholzer could be on the hot seat before long. But George, I'm going to go back to you again.
Well, yeah, I don't mean to be bragging, but I told Candy when we were on this program, Scott, you had a night off because of your hectic schedule, and she asked me who's going to make the finals, and I told her the Florida Panthers, and everybody laughed at me. But I had a sneaky hunch, like John said, based on the season record and based upon what Florida accomplished last season, the year before, I had a sneaky suspicion Boston might be in trouble. And this has happened right here in Detroit. As Jeremy mentioned, we've had Detroit teams that set records like that and then fell flat, losing to the San Jose Sharks in round one. So I agree. I mean, you never know when the upset's going to happen. And really, 3 game sevens, oh my gosh, and all road teams winning. It was just fantastic. And unfortunately, in some cities like Detroit, we got 7 straight years now with no Red Wings in the playoffs. And we lose sight of the fact of how exciting the Stanley Cup playoffs are. And Scott, you and I have talked about this before. It's the most grueling of the major sports to try to get through those 7 times 4, 20, it could be 28 games, but you got to win 16 games. And it's just fantastic hockey. And like you said, everybody was on the edge of their seat. They clawed back. Florida gives a lot of credit, man. They clawed back into that series in that game last night.
Yeah, I will say this. When I talked to Paul Woods in Tampa a couple of weeks ago, though, Paul and I did talk about this very subject, John. And, the Red Wings get somewhat of a pass here because they have 4 championships in their pocket. So where you have other teams that don't have any, obviously it was inevitable a rebuild was on the way. So I won't be as critical on the Wings as probably most critics will. All right, well, Roll's on a roll, Vogel's on a roll. So there you go. We'll take that out there. The NHL playoffs is like March Madness this year, sort of. Yeah, that's true. So, all right, let's continue on smoking. Jeremy, give me your thoughts about this, and then we'll wrap this puppy up tonight. And coming up after Sports Exchange, we have Fire Up Michigan tonight. So, just to give you an overview of what's on tap after the broadcast. John, so you got a good turnout in the chat room. Aren't you glad you made it, my friend? All right, coming up here on Fire Up Michigan, myself, George Eichhorn, Jeremy V, Will Rock, and Keegan Eckert will go ahead and summarize the Detroit Lions draft, and Jeremy we'll have some undrafted free agents. So after this show here, please stay with us for Fire Up Michigan. Okay, go ahead, Jeremy.
Well, it was amazing to watch. After the draft days that we had and all the podcasting, all I did was lay there and watch playoff basketball and hockey and seeing all those amazing accomplishments. And kudos to Steph Curry also for what he pulled off against the Kings, being the first player of any age to score 50 points in a Game 7 on the road.
Yeah, that's impressive.
That's impressive for any player of any position in basketball. That being said, it was amazing to see. I mean, seeing the lamp get lit and them tie it up and then able to hold on and take it to overtime and then light the lamp, 3 minutes into the overtime? Yeah, it was amazing.
Long, that's for sure. I think the Panthers did their thing with about under a minute right toward the end of the game, if I remember right.
Yeah, that's when they scored the last goal.
Right. They scored the tying goal, and then obviously they took care of business.
And then the previous game they won, I remember closest I probably ever had to having a heart attack.
Wasn't it an empty net
breakaway with seconds? I mean, there was 5 seconds left, and their best scorer is running, not free, but he's skating free. Right. And you think, oh my God, it's over. He's going to score, and he didn't.
Right.
So, I mean, let's face it. George and I both know, and everybody knows in hockey. Once upon a time you won 8 games, and that's where the octopus phenom came from. And now you need 2 octopuses to satisfy the 16-game wins that you have to do. And I know the Stanley Cup's the most grueling trophy to win because you think about some of these guys that play 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 overtimes until they get there. Then you wonder how much gas they got in the tank for the next game. So that goes on and on. So, you know, it's unbelievable, you know, and I think we've had a very action-packed few days here, and over the course of the week, John will, on his Twitter account, provide the average, all you folks out there that are watching and listening to us, with more and more updates on his Twitter account. And then maybe if we have an opportunity in a couple of weeks, John, we'll talk about it. But I think one of the topics that we're going to bring up on a future show, though, John, didn't want to do it this week because we wanted to focus on the Derby and the incredible amount of upsets, is you're going to talk about gambling with the XFL and the USFL at a later date. And so you'll have a little time to research that one a little bit. But this one here was just too natural not to pass up during this time of the week. So that way, if you want to know what to talk about it, Mr. Ryan in front of Jeremy, George, and myself, do a little bit of work on the XFL and USFL. And we'll just kind of just touch into that a little bit as we continue to line up towards the NFL draft schedule coming out. So any closing thoughts about these two topics, Smoking?
No, I'm good.
What about you, George?
One of the guys in the chat room said that it's like March Madness, the NHL right now with the upsets.
I'll put that
The only
up there
thing I
again.
would add is that, you know, the Panthers were plus 200, plus 220, right? If that's basketball, that translates to betting on a dog of maybe 5.5, 6 points,
right,
that you think is going to win. But in March Madness, we see upsets that are double-digit dogs.
Right.
So I would say that, you know, by comparison, it was unbelievable last night that Florida pulled off what they did. But it kind of pales a little bit to the monumental upsets you get to see in the college basketball arenas.
Been a pretty good year, though, for Florida, hadn't it? You got Miami going to the Final Four and FAU going to the Final Four.
Yep.
And now we were talking about the Miami Heat and the Florida Panthers picking up with a collegian. Well, you can talk about that's an unbelievable carryover for my neck of the woods, that's for sure. All right,
Jacksonville on the rise.
Yeah, no. All right, so Jeremy,
don't forget the Toronto Maple Leafs made it past the first round too.
Yeah, but let's stick with the Florida theme, Icorn. Okay, leave it alone. Don't talk about the Maple Leafs. Okay, I don't want my Tampa fans to turn on me. Otherwise, you have to bite the bullet on that one. Sorry, George. All right. With that said, as we wrap up the show here tonight, Smoking Jeremy, me, you, and I, and George have a little bit of work to do with the other guys. So let everybody know how they can get a hold of you, Jeremy.
Well, you can find me on the SouthFloridaTribune.com page underneath the Motor City Tribune with the list of authors such as Scott Morganroth and George Icorn himself. You can also find me right here on the South Florida Tribune channel on any night that Scott needs me. You can also find me on my channel, which is Kneecap Biting with Smoking Jeremy B. And you can find me anywhere on Twitter at Smoking Jeremy B and on Facebook at Motor City Kneecap Biters.
Yeah, Jeremy writes some exceptional content. One thing I like about his content, John, very short, sweet, right to the point. And that's really important when you have a writer to do that. Before I turn over to George, though, I want to let everybody, in case you just missed us the first time, let everybody know how you can find us again. The audio version of the Sports Exchange can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. So that's the audio side of the whole equation. Please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune, and go out there and please subscribe to us. Pretty simple out there. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers. Please also comment, like, and share the broadcast. Okay, we certainly enjoy feedback. Want to be a guest on the show? There's two ways of doing it. Participate in the chat room. Had a great turnout tonight. Or send your topic ideas to southfloridatribune@gmail.com. If you want to advertise, feel free to call me back at 954-304-4941. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and on the YouTube channel. And also you can find my Twitter, South Florida Tribune at Tribune South, and www.southfloridatribune.com is our website. And Candy Ebling does a remarkable job putting it all together. So just want to make sure we got that out. We'll go with George, and then John, you're going to wrap it up. Okay, go ahead, George.
All right, my book is out, Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air, and there's a lot of information here that you're going to love about Detroit Sports Broadcasters. Several of those broadcasters loved going to bet the ponies at the track. I'm not going to mention their names because that's not what I'm here for, but a lot of history about Detroit Sports Broadcasters in that book. There's a link to purchase the book at the end of my column on the Motor City Tribune under the South Florida Tribune banner, and also I write for the Detroit Monitor locally. You can also reach me at gicorn@yahoo.com and on Twitter at SandGSports99.
Yeah, what's good about George's book, I happen to be in there with Muhammad Ali and Jimmy Connor. It's good stuff. So
Yes, sir.
that's something I really take a lot of pride in. A lot of the individuals I've been fortunate enough to meet with the different places I've done. All right, John, one more time, give your information out there. Before you do that, I want to reinforce what I've said maybe one or two times. If you're looking for more updates on the Kentucky Derby, John's Twitter page will get them to you. Go ahead, John.
Well, thanks a lot, Scott, and pleasure being on the show with you guys. You can find me at John Ryan Sports and #1. And I'll leave you with this thought that the lowly Philadelphia 76ers without Joel Embiid, granted there is a little bit ways to go yet, are actually winning outright. And I was trying to say this to everybody that would listen to me today, that the Sixers are 12-5 straight up and against the spread without Joel Embiid in the lineup. And I think that speaks volumes to how much underrated Doc Rivers is as a head coach. So maybe they pull off game one here and shock the world like the Florida Panthers did. We'll have to wait and see, but they're playing very well right now.
Well, you know what, John? I like it when you throw those kind of things my way. That way, it just gives us that updated feeling about what it is. A lot of bettors are going to wonder about the Joel Embiid effect. And so thank you very much for bringing that to the forefront. So as I said, folks, this concludes this edition of the Sports Exchange. So on behalf of Jeremy B., Smoking Jeremy B., George Eichhorn, and John Ryan, my name is Scott Morgan, we're out the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange. Coming up afterwards, we have Fire Up Michigan. So we look forward to our next edition of the Sports Exchange.